Cleric's best.
No way, man. Wizard's better.
Cleric.
Wizard.
Prayer.
Spellbook.
Holy symbol.
Pointy hat. I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and today I'm hanging out with
Nerdarchist Ted.
And today we're going to be talking about spellcasters and how to make them more effective in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I believe you've been playing a cleric for a long time, and I've been playing a wizard for a long time.
Indeed. So I guess the question is how do you get the most out of your spells?
Exactly. But before we get into that, I know what we were missing. Deck of Many. Deck of Many right now have a Kickstarter going on that you can get involved in for holographic spell cards. And we can thank them for sponsoring this video. Down in the description, you can find a link to the Kickstarter as well as their website. Go check them out and show our sponsor some love. Now let's get back to how to make a more effective spellcaster. Both Ted and I are playing high-level casters, and we had different ways of going about it. You played a full caster cleric the whole time. I got a mix of Eldritch Knight and Wizard. So what exactly does being a more effective spellcaster mean to you, Ted?
For me, being a spellcaster, I wanted to get access to more casting of spells without the use of spell slots or being able to do them at will.
What I'm looking for when I'm talking about getting more out of my 5e D&D spellcasting is I want better action economy. I want to diversify my damage and saving throw types, as well as utilizing more utility spells in the game. A lot of these lessons for me were kind of hard learned.
Well, having played, 17 levels of Cleric, I've got access to a lot of, really great stuff. And Cleric has got damage spells, buff spells, healing spells, and with the 5th edition mechanic of being able to pump, you've got a wide array of abilities to look at.
Yeah, for me, when I was looking at wizard traditions, I actually swapped in the middle. I started off as an invoker because it kind of fit my character's theme, and later went to war wizard when Xanathar's Guide to Everything came out because I really wanted to synergize my spell casting also with martial combat in the game. So, anything that made my character more tanky is what I kind of lean towards. That, and as well as action economy. I wanted to use my bonus action as much as possible, my reaction, as well as my action. So that's another place where dipping in the fighter for 6 levels actually helped me out. And I was also able to go Eldritch Knight, where it increased my spellcasting ability.
Well, if you want to talk about action economy, Cleric does it really well, as well. With my favorite spells being Spirit Guardians and Spiritual Weapon, you can cast both of them because only one of them is concentration. So you use your bonus action one round for Spiritual Weapon. You use your action on another one for Spirit Guardians. Now you affect an area of anyone that comes into combat with you and they're just taking damage. You're using your bonus action to be able to guide an attack with your Spirit Weapon, leaving your action free to cast either a cantrip or another spell every round. So you've got the ability to constantly be hitting your enemies potentially after only using two spell slots.
So oddly enough, one of the strongest features I have is Action Surge, and it comes from not being a wizard, but being a fighter. And I've used it to double down on fireballs in a round, Steel Wind Strike, as well as Magic Missile. I know, Magic Missile, 1st level spell, but it always hits. There are no saving throws. It's force damage, so very rarely are things resistant or immune to it. It's just super effective.
Well, you want to talk about getting more. I found that actually going into the feats allows you to be able to get more castings. If you go into as a cleric Magic Initiate, you can get access to any type of spell casting and access to more cantrips. So if you want more versatile damage, as a cleric, boom, I chose Firebolt, and now I've got my standard attack being a wizard spell. I also took Thunderwave, and early on, it really allowed me to, push the enemies that were trying to assail me out of combat, allowing me to be able to, run away or get away from danger, or possibly allow me to move so that next round I could be able to heal an ally without drawing attacks of opportunity.
So there's a couple things that I found throughout playing Uthangar they ended up being problematic, but I was able to fix them as I went along. Like at one point I'm looking at my character sheet at damaging spells and I'm like, man, they're all fire, right? So that just pointed out, like, if you want to make a more effective caster, you definitely need to have more than one way of damaging your opponents, just in case they have resistance or immunities. I know you kind of spoke to that a little bit. The other thing is, diversifying the type of saving throws that they're rolling off against. You don't want to always be con or dex. Throw some other ones in there, strength, intelligence, to vary it up depending on what you're fighting.
Well, I kind of did the same thing. As I said, my standard attack wound up being Firebolt, and that was an attack roll. Whereas later on in the game, when the ACs were climbing, but their dex mods were lowering, things like Sacred Flame or Toll the Dead wound up becoming much better cantrips for me. But having access to all three throughout the game really gave me variety of damage types, as well as a plethora of combat options when it comes to making that standard attack.
One of the funny things is I found as the game was going on, and I've always kind of tried to balance utility spells, attack spells, defensive spells. But we had one particular encounter that really pointed out a flaw in my character for me, and that was we were at sea. Uthgar wears heavy armor. From my race, I get to put on medium armor, and I eventually took a feat and got even better armor, plus multiclass, and all helped with that. So it means I never have to memorize mage armor, right? I don't need it. I just wear armor. But we were out at sea, and we were fighting a kraken, which it ended up grappling me, and it could have thrown me like into the ocean. I'm like, oh man,
Or swallowed you.
or swallowed me. I was more concerned with it did swallow me actually, which was actually better for me because I wasn't drowning. Right, I was more concerned about being thrown and sinking. So soon after that encounter, I picked up the fly spell. See, I've always had Featherfall, which I've used it in cool scenarios, like we're all on top of a building, getting ready to do an ambush, and we all just jump off. Yeah, you just cast Featherfall, so it's like you're paratrooping down, and you attack or cast your spells or whatever. But that, I could have done that if I got thrown, and that's great, but it wouldn't help me when I was sinking. I was like, I need something to fix this, and that's like, oh, fly, right? So it's really important if you want to be a more effective spellcaster is to have those utility spells to compensate for what's going on. Or, if you're preparing your spells and you're going on a ship, whether you're a cleric or a wizard, it doesn't really matter. You have to take that into consideration and make sure you have the right spells for the right job. In this case, maybe water breathing instead of fly, or something that would have allowed my character to not drown. It would have been helpful.
You bring up racial abilities, and Variant Human allows you to get a feat at first level. And as I brought up, Magic Initiative really allowed me to bring in a more wizard feel to my character right from the beginning. I didn't have to wait to 4th level to really expand my spellcasting abilities. Later on, I wound up taking Ritualist, so now I can take all of the wizard and all of the cleric ritual spells, put them in my book, and I now have access to being able to cast them whenever I like. But as the game went on, I was able to say, you talked about utility spells. Well, things like Aid and Bless, Death Ward, these wind up becoming, really great abilities, and not having to worry about, all these ritual spells that I want to cast, identify, detect magic, and things like that. They're in a book. I don't need to prepare them. Now I have more room for these buff spells that are going to allow my party to survive and, have a better chance of winning in combat as I go on, as well as doubling down on a great spell, which I never thought about in the beginning, of Guiding Bolt. Not only is it a good damaging spell, it scales throughout, and I've seen many different clerics, casting it at significant levels. Yeah, a 5th level spell slot to do 8d6 damage doesn't compare to a wizard's fireball, but the fact that it's going to then, should it hit, grant combat advantage to your next ally that can attack, you can double down that with your spiritual weapon, or give that to an ally who, might be doing sneak attack, winds up being a great thing.
Absolutely. You also talked about feats. So as far as feats, I only went with one for my caster character, and that's Warcaster. Because my character often has a shield and an axe in his hand, he doesn't have a free hand, but you can use them as an arcane focus. Super helpful. as well as it gives you advantage on your saving throws for concentration checks. Super helpful. It's saved my bacon more than once. And then the fact that you also get to do as an attack of opportunity a single target spell, which also increases the versatility. And again, we talked about earlier, for me anyway, it was really important that I'm able to really use those reactions, bonus actions, and standard actions to use spells whenever possible. And there isn't too many rounds that go by that Uthungar isn't capable of doing that, whether it's shield for a reaction or Misty Step for a bonus action. Because he is a warrior, he can still attack things with his axe if he needs to, or he can just action surge to get another spell in if need be. Haste became a huge asset. It synergizes really well with my wizard tradition, which anytime he concentrates on a spell, he gets even tankier because his armor class goes up. And when it comes to actually throwing firepower around on the battlefield now, with 7th level spell slots, he's not really technically a slouch either.
And with that, that's going to be some serious area of effect attacks. But even the Cleric, or even Relion, has some serious area effect that he's got the ability to do. Even from the beginning, as I said, I started off with Thunder Wave as my magic initiate. So right from the get-go, I was able to attack, a 3x3 grid. But then as I gain levels, I get access to, again, Spirit Guardians. That affects everything within 15 foot of me. And then, later, a signature spell that I was using for a while, Blade Barrier. I mean, come on, you can use it to ring off enemies. You can use it to create, just a wall between you and things. And, if you happen to do it right, you put up a blade barrier, then you thunder wave them into it.
As your GM or DM, I know that you're often using spiritual weapon as well. So you're really getting a lot of actions out of your cleric. Whether you're healing people or attacking people, you've got a plethora of options ahead of you. And so there really is a lot of ways to become an effective spellcaster for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. You went broad. I kind of went focused where it came to combining defense and offense into my character. I know it's frustrated you many times. As I said, I'm really good at using those reactions to either increase my armor class or gain resistance to elemental damage. I've even nuked myself in order to do more elemental damage on the next round, also using ways to mitigate that damage so that I can then give it to the monsters in turn. Ted was really surprised when I dropped the fireball on myself, but then use absorb elements to take half damage. I'm hasted, so I get advantage on my dex saves. I probably make it. And also having other items that also give resistance and stuff. So you're really able to take a very, very little bit of damage.
To really dish it out back to the enemies.
Yeah, so it creates a lot of fun. And sometimes it's not even about doing what's best mechanically in the game, but what's most fun. And there's a ton of ways to build an effective spellcaster. But to me, the most effective way to build a spellcaster is to build one that's fun for you to play.
So the question is, how are you building your spellcasters and getting the most out of your spells? There's a great place to continue that conversation. It's down in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
On your way down to the comments, stop by the description where you find a link to the Kickstarter for Deck of Many. Go check it out. Get some holographic spell cards. These things are amazing and a lot of fun. Go check it out.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.